Hi, everyone. Welcome to our podcast series for September Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. We're interviewing families who have gone through childhood cancer. Our guest today is Joann Sugg, mother of Bo. So, to start off, could you tell us about Bo?
Bo was 27 when he passed in 2018. He was a funny kid, had a great sense of humor, very well liked. He's one of those kids that when he walked into the room, everyone just kind of gravitated towards him. Um, when he was uh, when he was about 6 months old, we found a little mark on his face. And they didn't really call it a birthmark because he was already 6 months old before it appeared. So we watched it very diligently. And then when he was about 7, it started changing in color and density and shape and that sort of thing. So we had it removed and it came back as malignant for skin cancer unrelated to sun. So they had clear margins, so he didn't need any treatment or anything at that time. And then when he was 15, he was diagnosed with large B cell lymphoma. And he went through treatment, and then a year later, he relapsed. So at that time, he went through chemo, he had a stem cell transplant, and then he had radiation. So he did really, really well. And then 10 years later, we celebrated his 10-year cancer free anniversary. But unbeknownst to us, a month before, he had found a lump down by his groin. But he didn't tell any of us at that time. He didn't tell us until a month later. Um, and so at that time, he was living in Colorado Springs. He was working at the Air Force Academy, loving life. Everything was going well for him. And the lump grew very quickly and became very painful. He he had just started working at the Air Force Academy, so his insurance hadn't kicked in yet. So he waited a couple weeks before it kicked in, and then he went to the ER, and they did a CAT scan, and they found a tumor that went from his anus to his penis. It was pretty large. So set him up with um, oncologist, a primary, and urologist because of where it was located. In March, just a couple of weeks later, they went ahead and did a biopsy, and it they sent that to John Hopkins, and it took a couple of weeks, and it came back epitheliosarcoma. So I reached out to his pediatric oncologist that he had in high school. And she fortunately knew a sarcoma specialist that worked in Denver and got him in there just within a couple of days. And he met with them and was told that sarcoma is a very rare cancer. 1 to 2% of makes up 1 to 2% of all cancers. And his particular type, epithelioid sarcoma, made up 0.01% of that 1 to 2%. That they really didn't have any treatment. There was definitely no cure, and they told him he had about 6 to 9 months to live, and he passed away 7 months later. So he was, he took it with humor and grace. He was a very faithful kid. His, his, he relied a lot on his faith. It meant a lot to him. And that's pretty much what got all of us through because he just really shared that throughout his whole that whole 7 months. It made us a lot stronger, and we all relied on his faith and our faith as well. So it was challenging, but man, he took it like a trooper. he joked and kidded with us till the very end. He had a great sense of humor.
Yeah, I think that's really inspiring how he
Y-
went through that.
Yeah, yeah, he was great.
Yeah. I mean, talking a little bit more about kind of the person he was, I was reading up on him and heard about BoNut Day and his recording for Friends. So I was wondering if you could talk a bit about that.
Yeah. So, after he passed away, he died in October and his birthday was in December. And we just kind of wanted to continue to celebrate his birthday, but mostly celebrate Bo. And Bo was not a big sweet eater, except for when it came to donuts and Dairy Queen. And that was pretty much his whole life. You know, he liked Dairy Queen and he liked donuts. But to give him like a chocolate bar or something like that, that wasn't it, you know. But if you offered him Dairy Queen, he'd jump at every chance. Um, so we decided the his on his first birthday celebration, we decided to just buy dozens of donuts and we took them to places all over town. We took them to the sheriff's department, the schools, the banks. We took him to his former high school. We took him to the car dealership where he bought his first car. We just spread them all over. Anyone that knew Bo got donuts. And so that kind of became a tradition until we didn't do it this past year, only because, you know, donuts got kind of expensive. The first year we did it, he was 27. So we went out and bought 27 dozen donuts and passed them around. And every year we'd add another uh, dozen. So he's been gone 7 years and it was getting kind of pricey. So we decided to celebrate in other ways. But yeah, so we had BoNut Day for several years and people still talk about that. So I don't know. It might be something we might have to start up again because it was a big hit. So yeah,
Yeah,
it was a
I
great
think
way to
that's really,
remember. Yeah, great way to remember him.
yeah. So, what was the cancer journey like?
Well, you know, we had been through it a couple times before, like I said, but it was different this time. When he had it built before, he was 15 and then relapsed when he was 16. And so I was able to make some of the decisions. You know, of course, Bo and I would talk about it, um, and, you know, discuss what was going on and what his options were. And he, you know, we would talk about it. And of course, I would do whatever really he wanted within, but I still was the main decision maker, um, especially the second time around when it came to the stem cell transplant. Right before that, right a month before he had his transplant, he becomes septic and ended up on a ventilator, and they really didn't know if he was going to make it or not. So we spent, you know, a couple weeks. He was on the vent for, I think, about 10 days. Um, but, you know, so I don't know. I was able to make those decisions, but I always made them knowing what he had in mind. When he had sarcoma the last time, he was 27. He was an adult, you know, he was living out in Colorado. We live in Illinois. He was an adult. And so, you know, I'm also a nurse. I'm also a, well, retired nurse. I was also a hospice nurse at that time. So it was a little bit difficult to just sit back and let him make those decisions and not take control. But he was an adult and he knew what he wanted, um, and how he wanted to spend the rest of his life. So that was a little bit different. Um, the other thing about it is, Oh, I kind of lost my train of thought. The other thing about it is when he had lymphoma, they always had a plan. When he was diagnosed the first time, we went in, we met with the oncology team. They gave us a big binder. They had protocols. We knew exactly what treatment he was going to have, when he was going to have it. Everything went like clockwork. It was a protocol. When he relapsed, again, they had a backup plan. They had a protocol. We knew exactly what was going on, knew exactly when he was going to get what, how they were going to handle everything, what the stem cell transplant entailed. We always had a plan. And when he finished treatment and was released after that journey, one of the last things that his team said was that Bo had a very high percentage of getting another cancer throughout his lifetime because of the chemo drugs that they used. So Bo always carried that around on, his shoulders, thinking that he was going to get cancer again. But the other thing they said, it would probably most likely be like a lymphoma or leukemia. Um, but they had a plan, that they would always have a plan of how to treat that. So when he was diagnosed with sarcoma, and at the very first meeting with the doctors, they didn't have a plan. They didn't have any treatment. They offered a clinical trial, which Bo tried. Um, but I think that was very difficult for both Bo and I to have to accept that nobody had anything. They couldn't give us anything. I'm sorry, this dog. Can you hear the dog?
No, it's
Okay.
totally.
Um, so anyway, that was really hard for us to accept that um they didn't have anything to offer him. And right the day before he was supposed to start the clinical trial, he his wound where they had taken the biopsy a month before became infected and he became septic again. And they went in and tried to clean it out, and the surgeon came back out and said, if we do anything, we will kill him, and so we're just not doing anything. So they sent him straight to intensive care unit, and his team came in um, and talked to him about what the next step was. And Bo was very honest with them and said, look, this is not acceptable to me. He said, you're going to have another 27-year-old kid come into your office someday with the same cancer that I have, and you're not going to have anything to offer them, just like you don't have anything to offer me. You have to try something. I'm not just going to pack my bags and go back to Illinois on hospice. You have to try something. And I was really amazed. I was very proud of him. And the doctors that were there, they just were in awe, and they said, if you want to try, we're going to try. We'll try anything that you want. And they did. It wasn't successful, but that spoke a lot about who Bo was. It wasn't, I mean, he wanted to live, but he also knew that there had to be something out there. He had to be able to help somebody else. And that's who Bo was.
Yeah, I think that's really great.
Yeah. Yeah. He was good that way. Yeah.
I mean, you were saying that he was first diagnosed at 6 months and then later relapsed at 15. I mean, like, what was kind of happening between all of that?
Well, honestly, it- the original the not the original, because they were totally unrelated, but the skin cancer, we never thought about that again. He was 7 when he had it taken off. It was, we never thought about that again. And honestly, we honestly never even thought about it again We never talked about it when he was diagnosed with lymphoma at 15. We never talked about it when he relapsed at 16. We never really even talked about it until he was diagnosed with sarcoma. And I was talking to the sarcoma specialist about it. And he went through some genetic testing that didn't show any correlation.
Oh, that's interesting.
So, it's just, did he have bad luck? Yeah, I guess. But nobody can, as far as the sarcoma, some people believe that it might be related to the radiation that he had during his relapse after his stem cell transplant, but nobody can prove that. So,
So I thought it was interesting. You were talking about how you are a retired nurse. So I think it's kind of an interesting question. But how has your perspective on childhood cancer or cancer in general changed?
well, um, the childhood cancer, I don't look at it through a nursing perspective. Um, I get frustrated because it's so grossly underfunded and people don't understand um, that it's not really as rare as people think it is. Everyone thinks it's sad and heartbreaking, but they don't understand how grossly underfunded it is. But as far as the my attitude, as far as a nurse, I'll tell you this. When I was a new nurse, which many, many, many years ago, um, at that time, I didn't really have much connection to cancer. Bo had this little skin cancer thing. It was taken off, no treatment, no nothing. Didn't really even, never even put it into my head that my son had cancer at that time because it was just like getting a mole removed. We just didn't even think about it. But early on in my career, I had a patient, and she was probably at my age now, in her 60s, and she came into the hospital because she had this pain in her gut. And back then, we would keep people in the hospital for days, letting them go through the testing and stuff. Now they don't do that. You have to do all that testing as an outpatient, but back then people stayed in the hospital for to get all their testing. And I remember it was a Sunday afternoon, and her doctor came in and told her that she had pancreatic cancer. And this was almost 40 years ago. So, back then, pancreatic cancer was pretty new. It wasn't, not a lot of people had it, but it was deadly. So, the point of the story is I walked into that room with that doctor and listened to him tell her that she had cancer and that, there really wasn't much they could do for it. And I walked out of there thinking that lady's life changed in 30 seconds. You know, when he walked in there, she did not have cancer. When he walked out of there, she had cancer, and her whole life changed in 30 seconds. And I never ever forgot that patient. I never forgot that doctor. I never forgot how tearful he got when he was telling her that. And it was at that point that I realized, ooh, cancer's not a very good thing. And it really changed my outlook on um, taking care of patients, not just on the good days, but on their very worst days. That lady was all by herself when she heard those words. And from that moment on, I always told my family, I always told my friends, I always told my patients, don't ever go to the doctor by yourself because you never know what you're going to hear. No one's ever prepared for that. So don't ever go to the doctor because you always should take somebody with you. And when Bo went to the doctor, with the sarcoma. When he went to meet them the first time, I told him when we got that appointment set up, I said, Bo, I'll come out to Colorado and I'll go to the doctor with you. And he said, No, Mom. He said, I'm an adult. And he said, When I had cancer before, you lost 3 years of your life. You lost 3 years of Grace's life. You lost 3 years of Casey's life and of Megan's life. And he said, I'm an adult. I can do this. And I said, Bo, I didn't lose any part of my life. You're my kid, and I would do it for any of you guys. I want to be there. He said, Nope, I can do it. So he went to that appointment and he heard those words, you have cancer. You have 6 to 9 months to live. And when he called me that night to tell me, my mind shot back to that very first patient I had, or one of the first patients I had, who heard those same words sitting in a room all by herself. That's not the way you hear you're going to die. You shouldn't have to hear that by yourself. But that is my outlook of cancer as far as a nurse, that you have to be prepared and you have to be empathetic no matter what happens or what is said.
Yeah, I think that's just really important.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah. I think that's another I've always been drawn to hospice even before I became a nurse. I helped take care of other people and stuff like that during the the end of life. Um, so when I had the opportunity to become a hospice nurse, I just jumped on it. It was my calling, and I loved it. It was difficult to be a hospice nurse when Bo was dying. Um, might not have been the best thing, um, but we made it through.
Yeah. So, what do you think is next for you, and how are you and your family going to continue honoring Bo?
So I have three daughters. Megan and Casey both live in Louisville, Kentucky. And Grace, the youngest, is a missionary in Canada. Um, but we have formed a foundation. It's called the Arvin Memorial Foundation. We just this year became a 501c nonprofit foundation, and our vision, our mission is to raise money to help find better treatments. It'd be great if we could find a cure, but if we could find better treatments, something that would at least give a 27-year-old kid a little bit of hope and his family a little bit of hope. So that is our goal. That is our mission. And we also give scholarships, but went to a very small Lutheran high school. Um, when he started going there, they were only in their second year of being a high school, and um, it became a big part of our lives. It was Bo's life. Um, that is where he met his friends and the guys that carried him throughout his lifetime, the rest of his lifetime, throughout every cancer journey, throughout the struggles that he had in between graduation and when he died, he struggled a little bit with some depression and anxiety, and those guys were there. So we give a scholarship at that high school every year, and we hope to, increase that to maybe, two scholarships or increase the amount or whatever. So that's how we honor him. And our foundation is made up from a lot of those guys. The scholarship that we give, we call it the Men of 10 Award. And it's not given so much, it's given in honor of Bo, but it's really given in honor of those 10 guys. There was a group of 10 guys that met at Christ Our Rock Lutheran High School. Their relationship blossomed and carried through, and those guys today are still very close. But those guys are the backbone of our foundation, several of them. And they help with our fundraising activities. A couple of them are on the board, and along with their parents. And it's really very special to be around those guys. They really carry Bo with them every day.
Yeah, it sounds like a really amazing group.
Yeah, it is. They are, and they yeah, they just warm my heart just thinking about them.
Yeah. I mean, that's the end of our questions. Is there anything else you want to share?
No, I just appreciate you letting me talk about him. I think that's if you ask any parent that's lost a child, um, just to keep their memory alive, they lived, they were a part of us,
Yeah.
and we like to talk about them.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.